So today we're going to be doing some review on basically going back through Mavui and what, since it's been a couple of weeks since we were last meeting because of Hanukkah and things were a little bit, out of place and a little bit out of schedule. So now we're meeting. I'm going to do a little bit of review, and then we're going to go back through another sugya of Shailahs and Teshuvas. Because that, we went over that very briefly and very quickly. And Bezras Hashem, next week we'll actually begin with Kushias and Tuvtas, which is the Kushia and a Tuvta is Meisvei, Isvei, Vihatnan. The different Lashanas for Kushia and Tuvta makes up about 90% of the Shakla Vitaria throughout the Gemara. And that's going to be next week. We're going to start on that, Bezras Hashem. And once we start on that, then we're going to spend a couple of weeks on that, because that's going to be probably the most useful thing you're going to learn in this class is learning how to follow a Kushia and Tuvta. And so there's a lot of different places in the Gemara. We'll do a lot of examples. But for now, I wanted to go back a little bit and explain a little bit, strengthen what we had before we move on next week and get into the real juice of Mavui Talmud. So if you remember, at the very beginning we went through a big list of the different parts of the Mishnah, and I said they're grouped into certain different groups. We learned the first group we said was the Mishnah, and then we said which was divided into two parts. The Mishnah is divided into two parts, which is the halacha and the machlokes techuya, which is pushed off, which is not the halacha. Any opinion in the Mishnah that's not the halacha is called the machlokes techuya. And the second portion of Torah Shebaal Peh is called the Gemara. And the Chelek base, which is the Gemara is divided into 21 parts, and those 21 parts are divided into certain groups that we'll be learning those groups at a time. In other words, focusing on one group at a time. So Chelek base, which is the Pirush Mishnah, which is the Gemara, is divided into 21 parts. The Gemara is divided into 21 parts, and those 21 are divided into groups that correspond with each other. So the first of those groups is Tosefta, Baraisa, and Pirush. If you remember, we went over these three. The second group is Shailah and Teshuva, which we also went over, and we're actually going to be reviewing those 5 today. And next coming is Kushia, Piruk, and Tuvta, which is another group. Sio, Rami, Hatkafta, Chatzrecha, and Maisa, which is another group. Shmaita, Sugil, Halacha, Teku is another group, and Agada, Hara, Shita, Vishinui is another group. And we're actually going to go into each of those a little at a time, sometimes more than others. Like next week, we're actually going to go over Kushia, Piruk, and Tuvta, because you can't have one without the other. There's no way to separate one from the other. We went over, this is, we said the first group was made out of Tosefta, Baraisa, and Pirush. Tosefta is the Shir HaMishnah. You've seen them inside. You see Tana Devei Eliyahu. Tana Devei Eliyahu is Tosefta. When you see the word Tana inside, it doesn't refer to a person. Tana spells Tav Nun Aleph. It's bringing a Tosefta. Now, Tosefta, remember we talked about, was very strong. It's strong and it can argue on a Mishnah. It was left out of the Mishnah, but it's very strong, very accurate, and can argue on a Mishnah. When you see a Tosefta coming right after, tell me if I'm going too fast. When you see a Tosefta coming right after a Mishnah, then the halacha can and will, the Gemara might very well paskin like the Tosefta against the Mishnah. And we saw in Brachos, when we went over Tosefta and Baraisa and Pirush, we saw a case in the Gemara where a Tosefta came in the heels of a Mishnah right after a Pirush, and the Gemara ended up paskening according to this Tosefta. And if you remember, he paskened according to Elisha ben Abuya, according to Acher. You remember that? Yeah, the Gemara paskened according to Acher over there. With regards to Kriz Shema and with regards to Tefillin, which we That's the old joke. The guy, according to in Kriyas Shema and in and Tefillin, we ended up posking like the guy who was Podik Oil Malchus Shemayim. But let's not talk about that. That's a so Baraisa is very similar to Tosefta in that it's taught by the same Chachamim from the Mishnah, the Tanaim, and actually Toseftas are sometimes called Baraisas, and sometimes you'll see a Tosefta that's brought under the siman of a Baraisa, which is Tanya. Baraisa kol svarim shasiko kadmonim acher haMishnah, that anything that was put together after the Mishnah. What does this mean? For instance, Mishnah is Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshia, who you'll hear from all the time, all throughout Shas, and it says any Baraisa was not taught in the school of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshia is not a Baraisa. It's called the Mishabeshta. Remember, we went over the mistake. The one where the Gemara said this Baraisa is a mistake. The beginning contradicts the end of it, and it's a mistake. Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Mechilta, and Rabbi Yishmael. We're talking just various different examples of Sfarim of Baraisas. Isis Rabbi Akiva, Teres Kohanim, he's Sifra, who's Sifra. We're actually, the Teres Kohanim is something we're going to go into a little bit later in the Shir, because the Teres Kohanim talks about the different ways of darshaning. The beginning of it begins with Zayin Midos HaZaken, which is Hillel HaZaken would darshan, or would tell people to darshan out of psukim using 7 rules. Rabbi Yishmael Omer V'Shlosha Asara with 13. Rabbi Yishmael said with 13, and Rabbi Yossi HaGalili said with 30. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, said with 32, and that Bezras Hashem will go over later on. Bezras Hashem we'll be going on that later on. And who Sefer Vayikra Levad, but these are all forms. Many of these later things are forms of Medrash. So, like Medrash Rabbah actually was by Rabbi Yoshaya put together. Rabbi Oshia put together Medrash Rabbah. I mean, like Sifra is on Sefer Vikra. Sifri is on the Midbar and Dvarim. Like, in other words, they correspond to different parts of the Chumash. V'simin haBaraisa Tana Rabbanan. When you see Tana Rabbanan, you know it's a Baraisa. And it will you see a Tana Rabbanan versus you see a Tana with an Aleph right there. You can almost see that the Gemara, it's not as strong as when it'll be the Tana. So if you see Tana Rabbanan, it's not going to be as strong as Tana. And sometimes they won't be able to argue with each other even. Tana Rabbanan not necessarily will be able to argue with a Mishnah, and may not be able also to argue with a Tosefta. But you'll see, in terms of the strength of it, you'll see it inside a lot more often that they seem even. But keep an eye on the siman, because if it says Tana Rabbanan, it's telling you it's a Baraisa, versus Tana, it tells you it's a Tosefta. Tanichada, V'Tanya, if you see Tanya, that also tells you it's a Baraisa. Although, like I mentioned, sometimes you'll see a Tosefta being brought under Tanya. Mashal Nechleku Alav, what the Baraisa doesn't argue on the Mishnah. What the Baraisa doesn't argue on the Mishnah, the halacha goes according to that way. And what the Baraisa does argue on the Mishnah, then the Gemara is going to discuss it and figure out. And usually the Gemara is going to proskin like the Mishnah, because if a Baraisa, weaker Baraisa, is arguing on the Mishnah, then now we have a question. But where is this Baraisa coming from? Who does it go according to? And the Gemara will always go iyun into that, and will explain what's going on. Who does the Baraisa going according to? Because for the Baraisa, it doesn't have an opinion that can be derived from the Mishnah that it specifically goes according to. Then the Gemara is going to reject that Baraisa altogether, and it will go after the Psak Halacha. So however the Gemara will decide to paskin, it will go according to what the Gemara paskins. Upirush haba v'agve Mishnah having inyane Mishnah. Pirush is when the Gemara asks, "My kach, what is this? What does the Mishnah mean when it says this?" You remember when we went through brachos, when we went into Perek Rishon of brachos, we talked about Masai Koyin es Shema b'Shacharis. When's the earliest time to say the Shema in the morning? Mishiakar ben Tchelas Lavan, when you tell the difference between blue and white. And then the Gemara asks, what does it mean, blue and white? Because if you say blue and white, just a separate fabric, a spool of blue wool and a spool of white wool, like if I remember correctly, Yosef took a good guess and got it smack on before I even put it up on the screen, that you can tell the difference between blue wool and white wool, like a blue spool of wool and a white spool of wool at night. Mm-hmm. Even if it's dark, you can still tell the difference between it. And so the Gemara says, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't. So then it explains, Tchelis Shabbat, Lulav Shabbat, one piece of fabric with splotches of Tchelis and splotches of white, and to be able to tell clearly where the differences are. That's how the Gemara answers, to explain what the Mishnah is saying. So Pirush is when the Gemara asks, what are the words that the Mishnah is saying mean? What do these words that the Mishnah is saying mean? And it comes to explain that. Any questions before I go quickly to review the second portion, Shailah and Teshuva? So, a good way I heard to remember Shailah. Shailah is a buoy, yeah. When you think of a buoy, that's in like a buoy is how you pronounce it. But if you think of a buoy that's out in the water, it sets the limits of where things can go, and it denotes, it clarifies what it shows the depth. It clarifies a lot of different things, purposes it serves. So a Shailah is when a person is asking in order to clarify. They're asking. It's one person. They're asking in order to clarify a din, to see how far does this limit stretch, as you're actually going to see in when we're going to go over a shorter Shailah sugya in just a moment, when we're finished reviewing here, and that sugya is going to basically, it's going to look like the guy is asking again and again and again, and giving answers just in order to clarify the limits of what's going on in the Gemara. So a Shailah is a buoy. It means we need, or to ask, to require. Then there are three simanim of a Shailah that you're going to see inside. The first one, you're going to see a Shailah that is asked from a group to a group, kal l'kal. And this Shailah, you imagine, if as I said last time, I said that the yeshiva is 1/3 Daniels and 1/3 Yosefs. So imagine if all the Yosefs came in and asked a question of all the Daniels. All the Yosefs were sitting around together, and they came up with a really good kasha, a really good question, and they want to hear what all the Daniels have to say about it. And so you guys came over to the Daniels, and then you asked all of them as a group. You said, "What's the answer to this question?" And then the unique thing about a kal to kal sort of question is you almost certainly going to get, or oftentimes going to get, multiple answers, because you're asking multiple people. You're going to get multiple answers, and then the Gemara is going to ask what's the difference between those answers, and try and discover why the answers are different. What's the difference in opinion? What are they arguing about? Or what is if the opinion is the same, but the reason behind it is different, they're going to ask my benehu, what's the difference between the two opinions? In other words, where is there going to be a time that because the reasons are different, the din is going to be different? Even though there's
or benayu?
My benehu.
Benehu.
Benehu if you speak like a Palisher.
Oh, I got you. Like the difference between Kanani and Kanaini.
It's usually nikud, I believe, with the tzevei. If I remember correctly, my benehu it's nikud with the tzevei. Where you're going to see kal lahakal, a group to a group, it's going to be the siman ibay lahu. When you see inside, it says ibay lahu. Reuven, you got that?
Yes.
Ibay lahu. So ibay lahu, it's plural.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's introducing that.
It's at all these simanim. They're called simanim because they're going to be at the beginning. They're going to tell you this is what's going on. This is what's happening now. So the siman for a group question to another group is going to be ibaya lahu. Lahu means to them, and ibaya means they asked. So they asked to them. They asked the Shailah to them. A group of people asking the Shailah to another group of people. Mimena Shailah's kal mina yachid. There is going to be questions, many questions throughout Shas that you're going to see where the group is actually asking from one person. So this is usually, more often than not, it's going to be the Bnei Yeshiva asking the Rav, the Rosh Yeshiva. So it could be, Mashal, if we're talking about the Yeshiva in Pampedise, there could be, Boi Mine Marba Rav Ashi, was the Rosh Yeshiva in Pampedise, the last of the Amoraim, was the Rosh Yeshiva, and there were others as well, but if you say Boi Mine Rav Yechanan, it could be the yeshiva, the Bnei Yeshiva in Tzipuri were asking Rav Yechanan, or in Tiberia were asking Rav Yechanan, what's the din in a certain case? Where is the limit in here? What's the answer to their question? And that the siman there is going to be ba'ul minei. So it's going to be base ayin vav, and then minei meaning from him. So cool trick here. The difference between, and then mimenu yachid liyachid, a question from a yachid to another yachid, is ba'a minei. So the trick I taught you guys last week to remember these two simanim, which are pretty similar, there's only one letter difference, is that ba'u minei, which is when multiple people or group is asking another group, it's going to be with a vav. Vav is gematria 6. That's a group. Whereas if it's going to be a yachid asking another yachid, it will be ba'a minei, which is going to be with an aleph. So it's going to be, if it's in yachid to a yachid, it's going to be aleph minei, from him. So one from one, or many from one. A group are going to be asking a question from one person. The halacha b'shailah l'fi teshuvas. You notice it says hatshuvais. The halacha in a shailah is going to go according to the answer that someone is going to give. So the answers in the answer to the shailah, which is the tshuva, that determines where we're headed and what the halacha is going to be in a shailah. Just as question and answer, but there will be times where in the end a shailah, the tshuva, where neither the makshin or neither the makshin nor the tartzin, neither the person who's asking the question or who's answering the question, the machav could be going according to. Right. There's a Maisa we're actually going to learn at the very end of the class. There's a piece of Agadata that we're going to learn after we finish the 21 Kolam of Mavia Talmud that actually talks about a certain Shailah that was asked in a group. It's a big long Baraisa, and it's a Shailah that was asked in the time of the Tanayim, where the halacha didn't necessarily go according to the answer of the tshuva, because first time he asked a question of one person, and then he asked the question of someone else, and obviously if the two people are giving two different answers, the halacha it can only go according to one of their teshuvas if the teshuva is opposite. So the halacha and Shailah teshuva, meaning sometimes it won't go at all according to the Shailah, if the halacha doesn't go according to either of them. But if we're determining halacha by this Shailah, then the halacha is going to go according to what the teshuva is to the Shailah.
And who's answering the question? Is it's a question that they're asking of each other, or the Gemara is going to bring the answer? I mean, how does that work exactly?
Well, here's basically a Shailah that's a group to a group, mikal lokal, which is ibaya lahu. The answer is going to come from a group of people. It could come from more than one. It could come from one.
And like you said, you could have multiple answers.
It could be that the Gemara could say Tashma, in which case it is l'cheir being brought by the Gemara an answer. It'll say Tashma, meaning coming here. But Tashma also it's used sometimes to bring a Baraisa, sometimes to bring a Memra, stating it of an Amora, to explain what's actually going on. So Tashma is going to be trying to give an answer sometimes. Sometimes it's going to be a question, sometimes it's going to be an answer, but when we go over Kushia, we'll talk more about Tashma. But that's if the Gemara is answering it, but usually it's going to be that a person is going to answer. So in Loilahu, if you remember when we had the question over in Masechta Baraisa that we went over last year, a question was asked to a group, from a group to a group, and we got two answers, one from Rava and one from Rabba bar Rav Huna. And then we asked a question on their answer. So the answer was given by two people because the question was asked to a group. In all of the other cases of Ba'u Minei, which is multiple people asking one person, the answer is going to come from that one person. And in the case of a Yachid asking another Yachid, the answer is going to come from the person that's being asked. So, Mamashal Iboy Lahu, you're not going to see anything attached to that. Ba'u Minei, it'll be Ba'u Minei Mirav V'chul. Mirav Pliny. So it's going to say Ba'u Minei, they asked from him, and then they're going to say the name of the person who you're going to be hearing from. So if it's a question that's for Rav Yochanan, Ba'u Minei Mirav Yochanan. If you see a Yachid and a Yachid, and it says Ba'a Minei, then it's going to say Ba'a Minei Reish Lakish Mirav Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked a question from Rav Yochanan, then you're going to hear the answer from Rav Yochanan. And there's an interesting thing, because you'll see it more in this one, in the last one, than in any other one, and I'm actually going to go over that in just a moment. We're going to be going over quickly another sugya of Gemara in Masechta Baraisa, which is that in a situation of a Yachid and a Yachid, then sometimes you'll have a continuing question or a continuing conversation of back and forth without necessarily any further simanim. So in our case that we're about to look at, we're going to see a case where he asks about 4 Shailahs. And on each of the answers, he asks another Shailah, but he doesn't tell you that he's asking, the Gemara doesn't make it clear that he's asking another Shailah, and so you have to really know how to break it up. So I'm going to point that out when we're about to go over that, but that'll be what that's the special thing about Ibayu Lahu, is that you'll get multiple answers from people. And the special thing about Ba'a Minei, the single Yachid from a Yachid, is when you'll have occasionally a going back and forth, constant back and forth, or that the Yachid will challenge the Makshin, the person who's answering the question is going to challenge the person who's answering the question. That happens very often when you're talking about a question of a Yachid to a Yachid. A Rabbim to a Yachid is more likely to be the Bnei Yeshiva from the Rosh Yeshiva, and so you won't necessarily see so much of the Bnei Yeshiva going up and challenging the Rosh Yeshiva and saying, what, to try and upshlag the Rosh Yeshiva. But when it's a Yachid from Yachid, oftentimes it's one person and their Chaver, who is roughly equal with them or maybe a little bit greater, thus why they're asking a question from them. And while sometimes it'll come going from one person to his Rav, even in the cases where it's one person to his Rav, then if he does challenge, it's in order to help the Rav to bring something out, which we talk about, and we will talk in Mirza Hashem next week when we talk about Kushia. Because Kushia is, yeah?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because we're coming up across something very soon in Baba Basra where someone asks a question, and then there's a Tosfos which says, how could this person ask the other one a question? He was so much greater than him, or the one who was asking the question was so much greater than the one the question is being asked to. And then Tosfos says that it's a different person than you're thinking. It's
yeah.
Either it was Rav Huna or Rabbi Huna, and they say, well, it couldn't have been Rav Huna because Rav Huna was too great to ask a question, so it must have been Rabbi Huna.
It sounds like it's the other way around to me, but just like it says, there's actually in there's another Tosfos in Perek Kama of Gitin that deals with the same issue with Rav Huna. There was two Rav Huna.
Yeah, right. They cited Gitin.
It could be one or it could be other.
We'll see it tomorrow.
Because there was a case of there's in Gitin a case where Rav Huna is asking with a chaver in front of Rav Yirmiyah, and Rav Huna was far older than Rav Yirmiyah. I mean, they might have not even lived at the same, like 100 years apart. The original Rav Huna and Rav Yirmiyah, and Rebbe Yirmiyah, I should say, and Rebbe Yirmiyah wakes up. He was sleeping, and he refers to the two Talmidim who are by him as Dardiki, as children. And the Gemara asks, how can Rav Yirmiyah call Rav Huna children? How can he say Dardiki? Because Rav Huna was so much greater. It's the same question, probably, but it's over there. And Tosfos explains also it must be a different Rav Huna.
Yeah,
probably the same issue. So Teshuva, as we've been discussing, Hiboya ala Shailah. The Teshuva comes to answer your Shailah. V'tiskayim l'fi psak halacha. And this is what I was talking about. It will be established according to the psak halacha, which means that if the Gemara is not going to poskin according to that opinion, it could very well that the Gemara will not poskin according to that opinion. So when it says halacha b'shayla fi teshuva, the shuva could be that the opinion of the tartzin, the person who's answering the question, the halacha doesn't go according to their opinion. So, any questions quickly before we move on to the piece of Gemara that we're about to go over? Okay, so let's zoom in here on where we're looking at.
This is in Be'ah?
This is also in Be'ah. It's in, if you look, it's on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. Sorry, the picture's not so clear, but so this is a question of a Yachid from a Yachid. Abba Bar Marsa asks from Abaya. So this is all the Achronim, Amoraim, the later generations of Amoraim, and they're going to ask a question about, I believe, Yom Tov, Shabbos. If someone who lights a candle, Nechri who lights a candle, it's forbidden to benefit from it. Yeah. So if the light of the candle is forbidden to benefit, the question is whether a believe this is talking about Yom Tov. The question is whether a Yid can, in order that he could still use his space and not have to go to another space to use it, is he allowed to extinguish this candle? So he asks the question, Ba'u minei Abaya, or excuse me, Ba'u minei Abba bar Marsa. Abba bar Marsa asked me Abaya, from Abaya. There's going to be a lashon of the Ba'a with an aleph, minei Yachid mi Yachid, one from another. Mahu, what is the din? The Gvoy says Haner, are we allowed to extinguish this light? Mipnei davar acher. In order to use this space, in order to use this something. Amarlai, he says, is it permissible? Amarlai. So Abaya's answer here. Abaya says, Afshar b'bayis acher. Can't he go and do something can't he do what he needs to do in another house? Yeah? Just gonna quickly. Can he do what he needs to do in another house? So that is the answer is actually a question here. The answer, the Teshuva to his Shailah was actually in the form of a question here.
Implying that he shouldn't extinguish.
Implying he shouldn't extinguish it. But since he asked a question, then our Makshin wants to continue to ask. He says, "Ve'ein l'bayis achar mai," and if he doesn't have another house,
what then?
What then is he? Where does he should go? What should he do? Just reminding me something. So Rashi, by the way, explains that davar acher goes on tashmish hamita, which is conjugal relations, marital relations, which it's sneeze to do it not with the light on. But so the question is, it's a davar mitzvah, which it is a davar mitzvah. And so the question is whether the Gemara uses the word davar acher as a euphemism. And I was remembering because it's actually in a lot of other places it's used as a euphemism to discuss that as a tznius euphemism for it. And so the Gemara asks whether it's on Yom Tov. The question is whether for that purpose, for tznius, for a davar mitzvah, can he extinguish this light? So it could be actually a very good question, a good Shailah. So he asks, Mahu l'kvoisas in there mipnei davar acher. Are you allowed to do it for davar mitzvah, for that particular thing? Amrlai efshar b'bayis acher. Can't you go to another house, another place, and involve yourself in that particular mitzvah? I'm going to pretend like I'm using the same euphemisms as the Gemara. Can you go to another house and do the davar acher? Yeah? Okay. So, after Ma'azacher, can't you go to another house? Now, the Makshin, Abba Marmarsa, says, Ein lo bayis acher mai. What's the din if he doesn't have another house to go to, another place to go to? So he says, Efshar la'aseis la'mechitza. Can he put up like a wall, like a temporary thing, like to block between the light and him?
Yes.
Isn't that building?
Huh?
Isn't that building?
In the building? Well,
isn't that building?
So here's the question: Is moving this chair or putting two of these chairs next to each other, is that building? So Lomashal, the things with the mechitzas, the little screens that they put up in most shuls, that's not called building. It's that's permissible to put those up on. I mean, shouldn't be a problem. Besides, also we learned earlier, no binyan lo ein binyan v'stira in kalim. So in kalim we don't say binyan and stira. So if it's a keli, like a chair or a piece of furniture, then there's no binyan. Question is, can he make a mechitza? Yeah?
A siding, right?
Huh?
The question here is with siding to fabric.
Yeah, just to just to make a cover so that the light from the thing does not get from the candle that was lit does not go over into that area where he's involving himself in Isa mitzvah, that mitzvah. So he says, is it possible for him to make a mechitza? So once again implying it's usher to do it, usher to turn off the light, because for this. But he only said it by implication, and so our Makshin's not giving up yet. Our Makshin says, Ein lo lasos mechitza mai. If he doesn't have what to make this wall with, this divider with, what's the din? So he says, Afshar likfois alav es a keli. Is it possible for him to cover it with a keli? Not, huh?
Put it out. You can't do
No, Lamashal.
Depends on what kind of keli.
Yeah, like if I had one of those. If the keli had like holes in it, the air would be able to get in fine, but it would keep it nice and darkened. Nowadays it's like if kind of like the Shabbos lamps. The Shabbos lamps turning the thing is like putting a keli over it. The mashal, if to use our modern example, is if putting a keli over it, putting something over it so that it doesn't the light doesn't come out. So he says Ein lo keli. He doesn't have a keli mai. What's the din? This is once again because he didn't answer clearly. This is usher. Then our Makshin, our Rabbi Abba Bar Marsa, our Makshin felt like he could really. He felt like he could keep asking because he wanted to really clarify 100% down what was the din with this, how should he do it. We've established in many places that sometimes for davar mitzvah they allow certain malachas on Yom Tov. So the question is this one of them? Is this davar mitzvah and sneas regarding this particular davar mitzvah? Is this something that would allow him or require him to be able to extinguish the light? So, what was I? Yes. So if he doesn't have a keli, ein lo keli mai. What's the din if he doesn't have the keli? So finally our Tartzin says Amalei Aser. It's forbidden to do so. So I think I'll continue a little bit, although I haven't.
Yeah, they're going to bring a refutation here in a second.
Yeah. So that's next week. I may as well do this a little bit further, and talk a little bit about Kushia and Tuvta, as long as we're here, and as long as that's what's coming next. Is that all right? You guys talking a little bit about Kushia and Tuvta?
We didn't get up, so you can keep going.
You didn't get up. Oh, but as soon as the Okud Raglov and you start to step back after Yihul or Etzon, now you'll be done. Yeah. Okay. So, what's your clearly there's a Shailah and Teshuva. So, what does a Kushia accomplish?
Defining the parameters of the.
If a Shailah is already defining the parameters of Lacha, what does a Kushia accomplish? So, Kushia means a difficulty.
Could be to bring out if you want to make the point stronger.
To bring out a chiddush. That's what a kushia is generally for.
Like to make the answer like stronger.
Yeah. So imagine to explain a kushia, and you say we'll say that you're telling me a beautiful or maybe we'll use so 2 Reuvéns, 2 Yosefs, and all right, fine, I got it. So we'll say that the 2 Reuvéns came out with a fantastic chiddush in Hilchos Shabbos, and it's something that is really strong. Actually, say better yet. So the 2 Yosefs hear you, and they say, "Oh, that sounds really good. I actually agree with you. That's a great chiddush. But I want to hear you bring it out more. I have this Mishnah that seems like it contradicts what you're saying." So this Mishnah, this is the Mishnah that contradicts you, and I'm showing you. I'll grab from over there where it has the copies of Mishnayos, and I'll open up to the Mishnah. I'll say, look, this Mishnah contradicts what you're saying. Now, you have to explain yourself. I didn't challenge you because I didn't like what you were saying. I didn't challenge you because I disagreed with you. Because I agree with you. You're fantastic. You're great. No, I challenged you because I wanted to see you bring it out more. That's going to be your general Kushia and Tuvta. The way I like to describe it is the way that we had introduced, the usual way to introduce a Kushia or Tuvta, a Kushia, is to say Meisvei or Isvei, like this. Isvei means it's one person challenging another person. So this Isvei actually came from Abba bar Marsa to Abaya. This is a continuation. This here is a continuation coming from this Shailah that was going on here. And so when it says Isvei, that means it's coming from one person. Meisvei means it's coming from a group to one person, or coming from a group in general. So you know how Aramaic works, that oftentimes a shin gets replaced with a taf. Yeah? With a taf? So here we have Isvei with a taf, or Meisvei with a taf. So if you look, in Hebrew, Meisvei could come into meaning Moishiv, which means to answer, but it also means to sit. So imagine if I take one of Yosef's, free weights, and I throw it into your lap. You want to get that free weight's off of your lap, right? Depends on how heavy it is. We'll say I put 100 pounds in your lap. You might want to get it off. Okay, you're putting 100 pounds on your lap. You want to get it off. The answer for a meisvei, for a kushia, is called a piruk. Piruk means to throw off.
Huh.
So.
Wait, what's a tufta versus a?
A tufta means a refutation.
Uh-huh.
If there is no piruk, then it becomes a refutation. But if there's a piruk, then they can avoid a refutation. A piruk could be anywhere from explaining it away, or coming up with a Baraisa, or another Mishnah that I can hang my hat on. And piruk is when meisvei, you get the weight put on your lap. Piruk, you try to throw that weight off. If you're strong enough, if you have a strong enough answer, you can throw the weight off, no problem. And if you're really strong, you might even be able to throw the weight into your friend's his lap, and he'll have to explain away his opinion. But maybe we'll play a game with it. I don't think we have the right equipment down in the gym for this, or I'm not sure if it would be 100% safe throwing these things. Anyway, but that's the mashal that I like to use when I explain this. Is I like to say, meisvei moshiv, he put it down on him, he sat it down on top of him, and piruk, you try to lift it off of you. Piruk, like haparik mo malchus shemayim, is someone who throws off the yoke of heaven. Chas v'shalom, rachman litzlan. But the piruk means to throw it off, to take it off, to get rid of it. And so I put 100 pounds of weight onto your lap, and now you want to get it off of your lap. So that's a kushia and a tuvta. But why did I put 100 pounds on your lap? Because I want you to get stronger. I want you to get stronger from lifting it off of your lap. So the point of a kushia is in order to help the person bring something out. I think it's a good mashal, but in other words, when Abba bar Marsa is explaining, is challenging Abaya here, he's not challenging Abaya by saying I don't agree with you. He's challenging Abaya to say, maybe I do agree with you, but I want to see you bring something out more into it. Isvei, he says, Ein mechabim es habakaz kadei l'chais aleha. Shouldn't, he's I haven't learned this part, so. You shouldn't, I remember, you cannot extinguish. That's so good on this lashon.
Rashi doesn't
explain it either.
in French or something.
Like I said, I haven't learned this before. Let me just quickly jumping into it because we had extra time here.
There you go.
Huh?
Where's Rabbi Art Scroll?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Get me that word. Because Hatichas eitz no, it's a piece of Rashi. There's like lots in Rashi. And Rashi explains it's a certain piece of wood.
It's within the wood.
It's a certain piece of wood that was either a beautiful piece of wood or something like that. It says because is a certain log, so that you want in order to use it for other things. It says Rashi explains over here, she'ein kivui zeh tzarich yom tov, because for saving this piece of wood, it's not a tzarich yom tov. Va'ani shmaiti lahavin le'seiser, and it seems to me that this would be an example of destroying in order to build in its place. So it's, even though it's a ein mechaven as a cause k'dei l'chayis aleh, v'im b'shvil shelo yisashen habayis, if it's for the purpose of that the house should not become smoky, or that you shouldn't ruin your food for Yom Tov, which is now Tzarech Yom Tov. So you can't extinguish it. Oh, now I see. Okay, this piece of wood, you can't extinguish it in order for itself, for its own purpose. That's not considered. Tzarech Yom Tov. But now we have a little teeny Tzarech Yom Tov. V'im b'shvil shelo yisashen habayis. If you are doing it so that the house doesn't become smoky, or to prevent your dish from being spoiled, your food from being spoiled, mutter, it's permissible to extinguish it. Now we have a problem. How is it a Kushia on the answer that Abaya gave? Anyone know? How is this a Kushia on the answer that Abaya gave?
Because it could be that
your tashmish is for the sake of Simchas Yom Tov.
It's Tzarech Yom Tov. There you go. Tashmish is Simchas Yom Tov. If this little bit of Simchas Yom Tov of not having the house get smoky or not ruining your food to eat is enough to say that you can extinguish a whole fire, a piece of wood, of burning wood, shouldn't you be able to turn off a candle to Simchas Yom Tov? Isn't it Simchas Yom Tov? So he says, now here comes the piruk. Piruk means he's trying to throw it off, which actually this is involving another klal actually that we're going to discuss later on, called shinui. Amalei, he responds. Abaya responded to Abba Marmarsa, Hahi, this Baraisa here. This Baraisa, the Baraisa is in Mishnah. It's a Tosefta. Okay, this is a Tosefta, so it's very strong. So this Tosefta here goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Ki Kamina, what I said, my answer that I gave you, that it's Aser, l'Rabbanan, that goes according to the opinion that argues on Rabbi Yehuda, that says that this isn't enough to extinguish the piece of wood. So now, if you want, we've got really like 5 more minutes left of time. If you want, we can go through this next. It's the same. It's just another Shailah.
So can I just ask you, what just happened there was he just basically refuted the refutation. He basically brought that there wasn't enough proof.
That's called a shinui. Shinui means you say, this Baraisa, I'm taking myself out of this machlokes. I'm pushing myself away from the machlokes and saying that this Tosefta goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, and I'm going to go hang my hat on the Rabbana. Instead of saying with Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to go according to a different opinion, and my answer is according to their opinion. It's a very classic way of a very good piruk is to say, yeah, this is very nice, this opinion, but I have another opinion to hang my hat on. We can't do that nowadays. Shulchan Aruch is Shulchan Aruch, that's it. And even though they would poskin from the Mishnah at that point in time, they would poskin their rulings based directly on the Mishnah. They would discuss it within the context of Baraisas, but it would be more or less, they would poskin based on the different opinions in the Mishnah. And while they couldn't, Lamashal, they couldn't poskin according to Beis Shammai. They can't just say, oh, I'm going to poskin according to Beis Shammai, but in the Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yossi, then it was a little more flexible because they were all Beis Hillel. Now we do have klalim on who the halacha goes according to in those cases, which we'll learn closer to the end of Mavui. After the 21 klalim, there's like another page or so of details on when it's a machlokes between this person and this person, it goes according to this person. When it goes between this person and this person, it goes to this person. Halacha always like this person, and it's just a couple of details that you'll see that are basically rules of how the Gemara will poskin. But what happened just now is Abba Marmarsa wanted Abaya to bring out his answer a little bit more, and so we challenged him from a Tosefta, which he said you can't extinguish a certain log kedei lichos alea in order to use it, in order that you shouldn't want it to burn. That's not Simchas Yom Tov. And actually, as Rashi explains, he says that the lichos alea means it's in order that it shouldn't get destroyed. So he said it's almost getting rid of the fire off of it, extinguishing it, is almost like binyan, or it's only like seiser actually. He's getting rid of the fire in order to use the thing. He's being seiser al minas livna, in order to build. So that's how Rashi explains it over there. The im b'shvil shalo yisashan habayis, but if it's because of these other things that are obviously needs of Simchas Yom Tov, then you can't. And so seemingly he says, if there's a Simchas Yom Tov, now you can extinguish it. So therefore, what's the difference between Simchas Yom Tov and you can extinguish it, and this other Simchas Yom Tov of Tashmish Amita, and where you should be able to extinguish it? Then Abaya explained himself, and he said, yes, very nice. This Tosefta goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, but I don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. He's saying I hold like the Rabbanan, and therefore I'm not bothered by this. It's not a good enough Tosefta to make me reverse my opinion. So we're going to talk a lot more about Kushias. We're going to spend on Kushia and Tuvta 3 or 4 weeks probably on them, because really does make up a vast majority of the Shachli V'Tarya, the back and forth, the Masu Matan of the Talmud. A vast majority of it is Kushia and Tuvta and Piruk. And there's a lot of it actually. I'm going to be using a lot of sugyas from Masechta Be'ah for that, because there's a lot of really fantastic sugyas in there. You remember the one where it goes through and 5 times, does the same thing over and over again? In Daf, was it Tess, maybe?
It's a long.
Yeah, there's that one where it was again and again and again and again. We're going to learn that one. We're going to learn that one after you guys know, the rules of Kushia and Tuvta, and then we'll see how much easier it is than when we tried to learn it this summer. So any questions quickly before we finish up? I'm keeping a look at the time because I want to not be too late on showing the video. You're giving me a thumbs up? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Alright. Thanks, guys. And next week we'll talk more about Kushia and Tuvta, and we'll actually go over it inside Mavui, and hopefully we'll get into it, and it'll be, Hashem, good.
Shailah!